I married someone that was, I always tell guys when they meet a woman, marry your conscience. Marry someone who's the person you wish you.
For more than 40 years, Jay Leno's laughter echoed through American homes like a familiar melody. His voice, his grin, that unmistakable chin, all of it became an evening ritual for millions. He was the man who tucked people into bed with humor, who made the hardest days a little lighter. But behind the bright studio lights and thunder of engines in his garage, another story quietly grew, softer, deeper, and far more human. It wasn't the story of late-night ratings or vintage cars. It was the story of love. Of devotion. Of a quiet promise made long before the fame, one that would define the rest of his life. Because while the world saw Jay Leno the comedian, at home he was simply Jay, the man who adored his wife Mavis more than anything he ever owned or achieved. Her presence was the grounding force in his whirlwind world. Whenever he came home after a long night at the studio, her smile was the one thing that made everything else make sense. And today, that same smile remains, though the journey behind it has changed. Time has softened their story into something delicate. Something fragile. Something that many families understand but rarely speak about. Jay still laughs, still cracks jokes, still finds humor in the smallest things. But now his laughter carries a different intention. It's no longer for America. It's for her. For Mavis. The woman who once remembered every chapter of their life together, and who now sometimes forgets his name. Yet when Jay looks at her, the warmth in his expression never fades. Because love, the real kind, isn't measured by memory. It's measured by devotion. And in Jay Leno's life, devotion has become his greatest act. Long before paparazzi and primetime fame, there was a dimly lit room on Sunset Boulevard, the Comedy Store. It was the mid-70s, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the uncertain dreams of young comics. Jay wasn't a star yet. He was a grinder, a hustler, a man testing jokes on small crowds praying one would land. That night, he wasn't looking for love. And neither was she. Mavis Elizabeth Nicholson had been dragged there by friends. She wasn't chasing romance or entertainment, she was chasing ideas. As a writer and activist, she preferred libraries over nightclubs, essays over punchlines. Marriage wasn't even on her radar, in fact, she had sworn it off entirely. But fate, as always, operates with a quiet sense of irony. When Jay stepped off stage, wiping sweat from his brow, his eyes fell on her, seated near the front, calm, poised, radiating a confidence that made her stand out from the rowdy crowd. She wasn't laughing loudly or begging for attention. She was simply present. And that was enough. Jay would later admit he was terrible at dating. He never knew what to say around women. But with Mavis, there was no awkwardness, no trying. Their conversation flowed the way all the best things in life do, naturally. What began with small talk slowly deepened into hours of sharing ideas, humor, dreams, and fears. For Mavis, who always believed she would live independently and pour her years into meaningful work, something unexpected happened. She found peace in him. Not fireworks. Not Hollywood romance. Just peace. And sometimes, peace is the loudest form of love. The months that followed weren't glamorous. They didn't dine with celebrities or vacation in exotic places. Instead, they walked, talked, worked, and learned each other's rhythms. Jay wasn't rich, but he was steady. While other men tried to impress her with charm, Jay impressed her with consistency. With sincerity. With an honesty so rare it disarmed her. He saved money religiously, avoided debt, and built life plans with a seriousness that softened her independent heart. She saw in him something she never expected, a partner she could trust completely. And so, on November 3, 1980, in a small ceremony with no press and no grandeur, they became husband and wife. Quietly. Simply. Perfectly. As Jay's rise from struggling comic to late-night icon accelerated, Mavis remained the quiet center of his universe. She never sought the limelight and had no desire to be the glamorous celebrity spouse. She preferred the background, the work that didn't need applause. While Jay perfected monologues that millions would watch, Mavis poured herself into activism that the world wouldn't see on television but would feel for generations. Her work with the Feminist Majority Foundation became her life's mission, especially the campaign to end gender apartheid in Afghanistan, a cause she championed long before most Americans even knew the word Taliban. She didn't need credit. She needed change. Jay admired that about her. He admired everything about her, her intelligence, her compassion, her strength. He would often say, "Every man should marry someone smarter than he is." And he meant it. Their lives complemented each other beautifully. He was energy, she was calm. He was punchlines, she was purpose. He lived in the spotlight, she lived in the shadows, by choice. They never had children, a mutual decision rooted in honesty and respect. Instead, they poured all their love and time into each other, their causes, their routines. Their home was simple, peaceful, and filled with unspoken understanding. Through the chaos of public life, the Tonight Show takeover, the controversies, the headlines, Mavis was Jay's anchor. She never chased fame, she protected him from its storm. And every night, no matter how loud the world outside became, Jay would walk through the front door and find her, the one person who looked at him not as a celebrity, but as a man. A man she loved. A man she believed in. A man she grounded. Life rarely announces its hardest chapters. Sometimes they begin with the smallest moments, a forgotten detail, a misplaced thought, a silence that lingers just a little too long. For Jay, it started subtly. Maybe Mavis repeated a question. Maybe she seemed confused by a familiar routine. Maybe she paused mid-sentence, searching for a word she once used effortlessly. At first, he brushed it off. Everyone forgets things. Everyone has bad days. But slowly, quietly, the pieces no longer fit. After medical consultations and careful evaluations, the truth finally had a name: advanced dementia. For most people, such news shatters everything. But Jay Leno has never been most people. He didn't break. He didn't despair. He didn't ask, "Why us?" He simply stepped into his next role, caregiver, with the same dedication he once brought to comedy. Except this time, there was no script. No punchline. No audience. Just love. When the diagnosis became public in early 2024, fans were stunned. The woman who once fought fiercely for women's rights around the world was now fighting a battle within her own mind. Court documents revealed painful details, moments when she no longer recognized her husband, times when even her own birthday felt like a distant shadow. But Jay never spoke about it with sadness. He spoke with pride. He became her conservator, legally responsible for her care, though emotionally he had already taken on that role long before paperwork was filed. Their daily routine changed, but their bond didn't. They watched TV together. They laughed at old jokes. He fed her when she forgot how. He held her hand when the world felt confusing to her. And through it all, his sense of humor remained, softer, gentler, but still alive. To the outside world, caregiving is a burden. To Jay Leno, it is an honor. He talks about Mavis not as someone who has lost herself, but as someone who still shines, just in a different way. He says he enjoys taking care of her, that she's still the strongest, most independent woman he has ever known. And in small moments, their old life glimmers through. Sometimes she laughs at jokes she doesn't fully understand. Sometimes she smiles at the sound of his voice, even if she can't recall their wedding day. Sometimes she looks at him with warmth that memory cannot explain, a kind of emotional recognition that goes deeper than thought. Jay cherishes those moments. Their home has become a sanctuary, filled with routines they've created together. He cooks for her. He dresses her. He speaks to her gently, reminding her of who she is without ever making her feel lost. He once joked about her buying expensive sneakers even though she hardly goes outside now. If she's going to walk around the living room, he laughed, she might as well do it in style. That's Jay. Finding light even in the darkest corners. Every night, he still performs, not for ratings, not for America, but for the woman whose smile matters most. Decades of shared life create a bond that doesn't disappear with memory. It settles deeper, in gestures, in touch, in presence. Jay understands this better than anyone. When he looks at Mavis today, he doesn't see what she's lost. He sees every moment they've lived. Every night she waited for him to come home. Every cause she fought for. Every quiet smile that kept him grounded for nearly 50 years. He sees his wife. His partner. His other half. Dementia may blur memories, but it cannot erase a lifetime of love. And Jay proves that every single day, with patience, humor, and unwavering devotion. Their journey now is different, but it is still theirs. Still built on the same foundation they laid in the 1970s, trust, respect, and laughter. And even if one of them forgets the story, the other remembers enough for both. Because love, real love, doesn't fade. It evolves. It adapts. It survives. Jay Leno once made the world laugh. But today, his greatest performance is happening far from television screens. In a quiet house. Beside the woman he has loved for a lifetime. Holding her hand. Making her smile. Honoring a promise he made decades ago, to love her endlessly, in every chapter, even the ones she can no longer read. There comes a time in every long relationship when the world begins to quiet down. The applause fades. The routines settle. The noise becomes distant. For Jay and Mavis, this quiet arrives softly, not as an ending, but as a shift. Jay Leno, the man who once lived under the brightest lights in television, now finds his purpose in the gentle rhythm of caring for the woman he loves. The world still sees him as the comedian, the entertainer, the car collector. But behind closed doors, he has become something far greater, a companion in the truest sense. He wakes her in the morning with the same playful kindness he used when they were young. He helps her sit up, brushes her hair, makes her breakfast, not because he has to, but because he wants to. It's in these small, steady acts that love reveals its deepest meaning. Not in grand gestures or anniversaries, but in the quiet moments that no one else sees. And perhaps that is why Jay never speaks of her illness with sadness. He understands something that only time can teach, that love isn't measured by memory, but by presence. Mavis was never a woman who sought pity. Her entire life was built on resilience, activism, and a determination to fight for others. She battled for women's rights across the globe, confronted injustice, and stood firm in her beliefs. And now, even as her memory slips, that strength still flickers inside her, in the way she holds Jay's hand, in the way she listens to him, in the way she trusts him even when the world becomes unfamiliar. Jay sees that strength. He honors it. He never treats her as fragile or broken. He treats her as the same woman he married nearly half a century ago, the woman who challenged him, inspired him, and grounded him. Even when she struggles to speak, he listens. Even when she forgets, he reminds her gently. Even when she becomes unsure, he becomes her certainty. This is what love looks like after decades, not perfect, not easy, but enduring. Jay's garage has always been more than a collection of cars. To him, it's a sanctuary, a place where engines hum like old friends and memories stick like oil on steel. Mavis used to walk in sometimes, amused by the sheer chaos of tools, wheels, and wires. She never cared for the cars themselves, but she loved the way Jay talked about them as if each one had a story. Now, she visits the garage less often. Some days she doesn't remember what it meant to him. But Jay remembers enough for them both. Sometimes he brings her out to sit with him while he polishes a fender or checks an engine. He talks to her the same way he always has, not slowing down, not simplifying, not changing the rhythm of his voice. He knows she may not understand the details anymore, but she recognizes something far more important, his warmth, his excitement, the sound of his love woven into every word. And every so often, she smiles. That smile is enough to turn an ordinary day into a treasure. Dementia reshapes time. There is no clear line between past and present. Some mornings, Mavis wakes up thinking she's still in the 1990s. Some evenings, she calls Jay by a nickname she hasn't used in decades. And sometimes, she just looks at him with a distant curiosity, as if he's someone she once knew but can't quite place. And yet, Jay never corrects her harshly. He steps into whatever moment she's living. If she thinks they're newlyweds, he plays along. If she believes she still works for a cause, he encourages her. If she forgets who he is, he simply introduces himself with a smile. In Jay's world, love adapts. Love bends. Love waits. Because the truth is simple, Mavis may no longer hold on to yesterday, but Jay holds on to all of it, for both of them. Growing old is often portrayed as peaceful, two people walking into the sunset, hand in hand. But in reality, it takes courage. It takes strength. It takes commitment that goes far deeper than wedding vows. Jay and Mavis have reached a stage of life where vulnerability is shared, where roles reverse, where love becomes both a shield and a support. Jay has cars worth millions, but none of them matter compared to the sight of Mavis sitting beside him on the couch, holding his hand, even if she doesn't fully remember why. There is a kind of bravery in staying. In caring. In choosing to love someone even as pieces of them slowly drift away. Jay embodies that bravery every single day. There is a moment that happens often now, a moment many caregivers know too well. Mavis will look at Jay with soft eyes, studying him with a tenderness that feels familiar, and yet, distant. And in that moment, she asks quietly, "Do I know you?" For many, it would be heartbreaking. But Jay simply smiles. He takes her hand and says, "Yes. I'm the man who loves you." And even if her mind cannot recall the decades they shared, her heart recognizes the truth in his voice. Love isn't stored in memory. It lives in feeling. In presence. In the invisible threads that bind two souls over a lifetime. Jay understands that better than anyone. He is living proof that love does not depend on what someone remembers, only on what someone feels. And Mavis still feels safe with him. Still feels warm beside him. Still feels loved. That is enough. That is everything. When Jay Leno married Mavis in 1980, he made a promise, in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. Most couples say those words without truly imagining what they mean. But Jay is living them every day, every moment. Not out of obligation. Not out of guilt. But out of pure, unwavering devotion. This chapter of their lives is difficult, yes. But it is still filled with love. Still filled with laughter. Still filled with quiet moments that mean more to Jay than any applause he ever received. And in the end, that is the story. Not of a comedian. Not of a celebrity. But of a husband who chose love again and again, even when love became hard. Even when love required patience. Sacrifice. Strength. This is Jay and Mavis. A love story still being written, one tender moment at a time. As the years passed, both Melissa Gilbert and Patty Duke found themselves evolving emotionally and professionally. Time has a way of softening even the deepest wounds, and, slowly, the intense bitterness that once defined their relationship began to fade. According to Gilbert, the distance allowed her to reflect on the pressures both women faced as young stars navigating an industry that often pitted actors against each other. Their unexpected reconciliation reportedly came during a charity event, where a brief exchange turned into a heartfelt conversation. Melissa later shared that seeing Patty after all those years brought back a mix of memories, some painful, some nostalgic. But beneath it all, there was a sense of closure waiting to be acknowledged. Patty Duke, who had also experienced her own share of personal battles, expressed regret for some of the misunderstandings of the past. Over time, this renewed understanding transformed into a quiet friendship built on mutual respect. While the scars of their earlier conflicts never fully disappeared, both women recognized the value of forgiveness. Melissa has since spoken publicly about how healing that moment was for her, describing it as one of the most meaningful steps in her emotional growth. Their story stands today as a powerful reminder that even the most turbulent relationships can find peace when both sides are willing to confront the truth, let go of resentment, and embrace maturity.